Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another season 2 episode of Lit Happens. Today we have our teacher talks with our regular co host, Adriel. How are you, Adriel?
I am very well, thanks, Bill. Got the hoodie on. We're
Yeah.
heading into winter weather
Yeah.
now, so it's
Yes. As
nice. Yeah, it's nice, but like I also feel like sleeping quite a bit. So it's getting up for work
mm,
these days is getting a little bit tougher, but I
definitely.
think with the right sort of performance enhancing coffees and whatnot, caffeine
Yes.
supplements,
Uh-huh.
as many teachers will attest to. I think it's a staple that we can sort of allow to get us through our days. That is a whole heap of
Yeah.
word jargon, and it's probably a great sort of intro into our episode for today as well.
Yeah, absolutely. As we film this, we're, filming on a cold, wettish Monday
Yeah.
morning. It's middle of the term now. So obviously, people are getting into their content now. They're getting into probably what they're going to get their students to create. And hence our Teacher Talk episode for today, which is all about looking at stage 6 creative writing and really trying to consider this idea of mastery in creative writing. We know a lot of schools right now would be integrating a little bit of Mod C as they're getting into the term, perhaps assessing Mod C this term if in term 3 they're going to be doing their trial examination.
Mm.
So I think this is a really, really relevant episode, Adriel, and I think people are going to really enjoy the questions. We've picked one student focused question on creative writing and then also one teacher question. So, we're kind of covering all the bases here today, covering all the bases.
Yeah. It'll be
Yeah.
good. It'll be good for all of
Yeah.
the students as well. And I know, like for example, where I'm currently working, our kids are going through a Mod C sort of assessment task, and
Yeah.
it's a writing portfolio, a little bit of creative writing involved in it, imaginative writing. And I know it's often one of those bugbears for students because a lot of students will say, through junior school, and especially if you're teaching in the advanced streams or even some of the high end standard streams, kids will be like, I love writing. I know, I've read quite a bit in my life and whatnot, but I never am able to translate it into those higher
Yeah.
end results. And I guess we can sort of just have a little bit of a conversation as to what the markers might look for, what teachers are looking for when it comes to those high end responses, especially for students. And then for teachers, I think just the conversation as to how we teach it. I think that's probably
Yeah.
where it's at because I teach it differently every single year, depending on my cohort. And that's probably a little bit of a
Absolutely.
segue there.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Well, why don't we then begin with the student question then? So, I freeze on creative tasks or my stories feel flat. How do I actually get better at stage 6 creative writing for the current HSC, in particular the new syllabus? So,
Mhm.
I guess this is a really good question for, if you're a year 11 student and you're listening because you're working towards what year 12 is going to be like, and absolutely an important question if you are a year 12 student, because I think many of them, will say a similar thing. Like I know how to write, I understand how to use
Mm.
techniques, but it's the putting it together in a way that feels emotive and not flat, in a way that there's some tension and pacing and not just I wrote a story for the sake of writing a story, because I know I've heard that from students too. Oh, well, like I just wrote this because these were kind of my parameters and I just thought this would be good to
Yeah,
write. And I
yeah,
think one thing for students to note is if you are writing something that is of interest and connects and relates to you, then it's going to be a lot harder for your story to feel flat, because it's going to
mm,
have your own thoughts and emotions backing it up, as opposed to, you can tell, right, Adriel, like you can tell when you marked a story
yeah,
from a student who just wrote it because these were the kind of the parameters of the assessment, and they're like,
yeah.
well, tick tick, done, and it just doesn't hit the way that another story that might have been more thoughtful does.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And this is even like a, in general, this sort of idea of the writing is something that is a craft and it's facilitated by the unit that we do study in Year
Yeah.
12 English. I know a lot of successful writers that we've probably studied over the years, especially in this unit of work, will definitely attest to this idea or definitely promote the idea that writing is a process. It's not this one and done perfection sort of element. And
Yeah.
I know what you're sort of saying here because do you remember the piece of advice that we were given back in maybe yesteryear when we were going through year 12? And remember, like, I vaguely, not vaguely, sorry, I remember this quite well. If you were struggling with an idea for a creative piece, the advice back then was think about a movie plot and just rewrite it into your sort of story, and just becomes this whole kerfuffle of just absolute dog poo. I,
Terrible. Yeah.
it's what we're gonna say. Like it was just, it's funny because back then you thought, yeah, yeah, like what was a good movie back then? Like Shrek, for example, when we were, I don't know, it was towards the end of our schooling there, and it's like, oh yeah, we're gonna write like a plot sort of recaps every. I wrote so well. I used like one simile in my piece, and I'm definitely gonna get a band six now. And it's just they get so focused on this whole plot digression, which becomes like a retell, and they lose the
Yeah.
point of what creative writing in the HSC is all about. So it's good that you
Oh,
sort of
yeah.
bring that up. I like this idea of kids become hyper focused on just the parameters that they've been set. So, for
Mhm.
example, similarly, we'll see in our writing platforms for essay writing, and I know I'm digressing a little bit with the essay writing, but let's say you've got a kid that's doing a pure paragraph or a pedal paragraph or whatever platform that you use. I think one of the biggest struggles that I'm starting to see a lot more now is kids are so hyper focused or fixated on this idea of this. I've got my point, I've got my evidence, I've got my explanation, but they don't see the bigger picture. Like that, they don't step outside of that little, uh,
Yeah.
let's say that
That
little
scaffold or
window that
whatever.
they've created for
Yeah.
themselves, and they don't see the
Mm.
bigger picture of what the writing looks like overall. It's just
Yeah.
I've done the scaffold. I should be getting a higher mark, and I think that's very difficult when you look at the nature of the both the old HSC Mod C and reading to write sort of units, plus moving into the new one, which is 2027 onwards. We're starting to see like a kids becoming less aware of the whole process of writing. Do you know what I'm
Yeah.
trying to sort of say? It's a I
Yes.
want to get this one and done sort of thing right now, and I think
Yeah.
that's probably the biggest thing. And I mean, going back to this question, I freeze on creative tasks. I think one of the big things that kids lack to do these days is a simple brainstorm. Uh,
Yeah.
I know we share this sort of student that we've been sort of speaking about in recent times, and I said to him, he's fantastic as well. The other day in class, I said to him, "Hey, about 2 weeks ago, 2 lessons ago, sorry, not 2 weeks." I said, "What was one thing that Mr. Manny actually told you that you need to start your writing with?" And he's got like some ideas, and he's already started his writing. And I said, "What are you lacking?" So I don't know, like he's actually done this process with his essay writing before, like his brainstorming, and he loved it, and he got his ideas,
Mhm.
and he comes to me, in this lesson. He's like, "So I just don't know how to move forward. I don't know what I'm doing." And I said, I looked at his portfolio, his writing portfolio, and I said, "Dude, where's your brainstorm? You clearly said that this was a great process that you had embedded for your writing. There is a big lack of this, in this." And it's like
Mhm.
you'll have your best kids often neglect this because they think they've got the skill once successfully sort of completed, whether it be in any form of writing, and it's like then they move forward, and it's like, oh, I can just keep that in here rather than on the page. And then comes the point where we sort of said with the question, I freeze and then I don't know where to move forward. Why not
Yeah.
start with a simple
Because they miss
brainstorm?
that skill. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
exactly
Yeah.
right. Get your ideas out on the page. I think that's probably one of those big things that many successful writers beyond the HSC and beyond the world of high school English will probably tell you is you need to get your ideas onto the page. They spend months, maybe years planning what they're going to be writing. And I think that's probably a skill that students
Yeah.
lack. And I don't know if it's because they lack it or it's because they're so under the pump with time pressures that they just think, "Oh, I don't have enough time to do this. I just need to streamline everything." and there is some truth to that, with the pressures they're facing. But I mean, I always tell the students, I say, well, this is just a precursor to life. Wait till you have many adult responsibilities,
Mhm.
and then you need
Yeah.
to sort of juggle and you need to sort of adjust and adjudicate. I mean, you don't like. I mean, an adult doesn't just do things off the whim. Hopefully, um, this day and age, but we plan. We're diligent. The people that seem to have their heads on a level
Mhm.
plane would be the ones that, they've got all their bills set out. They know what they're doing, in their calendar. They've got their reminders. They've got, and that's that brainstorming process, isn't it? And I think that's probably one of those things for our kids. Yeah, 100%.
No, I think that's a really great point you make because when they, get that paper or that assessment and they have to think on the spot, if there's some sort of variation from what they've pre-prepared and they've gone through that very perfunctory process like you just talked about, and they haven't actually practiced those skills of how do I come up with something in response to a prompt, yeah, then of course they're going to freeze because they're like,
Mm,
because usually when you think in that really, very straightforward process, you mentioned this before, you're not thinking outside of the box. So other
no,
ideas cannot come to you because you're not
yeah,
allowing your brain to open up for that. And so I think time constraint, probably like time issues, is a thing. But
yeah,
honestly, I think the bigger thing is not having ideas, not thinking about things, and I mean, none of us are perfect, but you ask a lot of students these days, what are you interested in? What issue is interesting to you? What excites you? What
mm,
challenges you? And a lot of them are like, I don't know, because they don't
yeah,
think about these things. But
yeah,
when you are practicing the creative writing, I think that's the perfect opportunity for students to think about what issues are grabbing them, what
mm,
topics in life are of interest to them, and then use that and not worry too much about. Sometimes students want to get straight to the perfect stage 6
yeah,
response. It's not really about, it's the process, isn't it? Because you
yeah,
can never get to that if you don't have your process down pat. And then yeah, I think you made a really good point about trying to get out of your head a little bit and think beyond just, I'm just writing a story for HSC's sake. Well, you're writing a story that's going to be read by adults. It needs to be something
yeah,
that's interesting and universal and something that would capture your attention as a student as well as the attention of, adult markers, peers as well. We do a lot of peer assessment these days with creative writing. And I think for students, they have to have that turning point.
yeah, yeah. I
So
think
then
so.
what might be, I'm sorry, go on, Adriel. Yeah.
No, no, you're right. You're right. You're going to move on. Like, what are some of sort of the tips that we might give our students here?
Yeah. What will we
I'm going to
say to
sort of,
those students? Yeah.
yeah.
To help
So
them. I know we talked a little bit about things that might be helpful, but like some actionable things to help them
yeah,
move beyond that freeze moment.
yeah. No, no, exactly right. So we're probably looking a little bit at different ideas here, where we're looking at brainstorming. As I said, as a good starting point. Yeah. I apologize if you guys can hear my puppy dog in the
You
background there.
sweet
She gets
puppers. Yeah.
a little bit excited. But that's all right. Um,
Yeah. Hi,
she's
Millie.
doing her.
Yeah.
She's excited. She wants to join. But I think the
Let's
brainstorming
see.
process is definitely a great starting point. And I like to do like little ideas. Sort of, my kids will probably see this. They laugh nowadays. Like, I'll just draw like images on the board. Now, I'm no way an artist or anything like that, but I'll draw something up and I'll be like, all right, what are some of the bigger picture ideas of humanity on just like, I don't know, like a random sort of picture or an image, like
Mhm,
universal human traits,
mhm,
that link, that connect with us being human beings. So we brainstorm with that
mhm,
to formulate an idea to base our piece on. And I think that's a good
mm.
starting point because kids will probably often say, "Well, I just don't know what to write my story on." Well, what's speaking
Yeah.
to society? Like, what is a prominent voice? What is a prominent idea that is resonating in your current world at the moment that you think will not only engage with students, but yourself, because you need it to engage with yourself. Thus, your writing will become more personal. It'll have that authentic voice, but also what will engage the marker who might be someone a little bit older, someone a little bit more mature, a few more grey hairs. I've cut my grey hairs recently, so there are normally quite a few, especially during the
Mhm,
HSC marking sort of period. But
mhm,
I think those universal ideas, like what are those ideas that are inherent with being human. And I think that's where you start off. Like your piece needs to be based off of that. And I often tell my students, brainstorm these ideas. Don't just have one, have multiple ideas because they'll often interlink. And then this is going to be very, very important in the next stage, which is, well, think about the moral sort of message that you're leaving
Yes.
your marker with or your reader with. What is it that they're going to be like? Oh, this piece, it's actually spoken to me. How does it speak to your reader? And how are you going to do that in that
Mm.
800 or so words that you have for a creative writing piece in particular? But I think one of the most important things is this, and this is why we do the narratives that shape our world unit in the 11, and it's still continuing
Mhm.
through. Is remember every piece of literature tells a story. It's got a narrative to it, innate with it. It's not just this digressive sort of plot retell or doing something for the sake of doing it. And this is where we see those kids that will follow all of the you know, structure in terms of the scaffold maybe fall away compared to that kid that has that authentic voice. Is if you
Yeah.
don't have that sort of moral message, what are you leaving with the marker, the reader? Similarly, like if we'll probably do an episode on discursive writing as well, but the
Yeah.
discursive sort of form of writing requires you to sort of go on this roundabout sort of way of discussing the multiple perspectives regarding an idea. Creative writing for us as markers, I think from what I've sort of gathered over my last few years and in this field in particular has been, well, how does that piece really stand out? It's the message that it presents. It's that deep
Mm.
thought or that depth which goes beyond the surface. And like these are things that we often tell our kids. And if you're a student listening, you've heard this, but you just don't know how to translate that onto the page. Well, it starts with getting your ideas
Yeah.
onto the page. That
Yeah.
brainstorm is so, so important. I would also say
Yeah.
another thing would be with your brainstorm the types of techniques you're going to be using. So start with your bigger techniques, which might be, like a motif or an extended metaphor that runs through the entirety of the piece, because that's the glue that keeps your piece together. It's the glue that allows the tension to remain throughout the entirety of the piece. I know markers will often pay attention to this. It's all how well have you sustained the piece in that 800 or so words.
Mm.
Even myself, when I'm
Mhm.
looking, I'm like, okay, it's been sustained well. And it's often through a bigger technique like a, extended metaphor in particular. I think that's probably great. A great
Mhm.
sort of starting place. But then you go into like the little
Yeah.
techniques. Now, don't just chunk it into just a simile or a piece of personification or a metaphor. It's okay to be able to use them, but you need to use them effectively. All right, it's
Yeah.
very important, and each
Purpose.
technique
Mhm.
yeah, it needs to be purpose driven. Exactly right. Now, again, the people will be like, "Well, what do you mean purpose?" Well, what did we just say? What is the story? What is the message? What is that moral that you're trying to allow to resonate with your reader? And I think that's where your techniques now start to connect back to. And I think
Yeah.
that's probably a big thing. Like, it's just about this adaptation. It doesn't happen perfectly in one go. It's about how will you use them, try them. If it works, read it out loud. If it doesn't work, if it doesn't flow, then, go back to the drawing board. I mean, I've just mentioned another thing like the flow, play with punctuation, play with your structure, read your work out aloud to see the rhythm, the pacing, allow it to understand the tone. Like these are all the things that we do look at as markers, and these are
Yes.
the things that allow the effective pieces to definitely stand out
Yeah.
more so than those just really structured, narrow pieces at times. So,
Mhm.
with those narrow
Yeah.
pieces, you might get to the top of the band five range, but it doesn't have that sort of light or that glimmer that takes it into that next stage, which has been refined, crafted, and has that personal voice resonating through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Just a couple of things to add on to all those great suggestions you made for students listening. Sometimes the way that I get students when they get an unseen stimulus, or to look at it and think, well, what's the literal messaging and image coming through in
Mm,
this, quote, or
mm,
sometimes it is an image or
yeah.
what have you. And then, okay, we've got that. Well, then what's the more metaphorical messaging coming in
Yeah.
through that picture or through those words? What issues or ideas can springboard off of that? And then thinking about, okay, you could include some literal, sure, but what is the more metaphorical message? And I think when you come back to your thing about the moral, yeah, I think the phrasing, the language that I tend to use, but it's a similar thing here, is that purpose or the intent. So, for example, if you look at the stimulus and it's saying something about hope or success or struggle, and then I say to my students, okay, that is, an issue or a theme you can latch onto, but then like your moral, what are you saying about it? So what is the message or the point that you're making? And it's
Yeah.
often beyond just the one word theme. It's got to be kind of a bit more of a statement, and then that statement gives you the meat to, okay, how do I then craft a scenario or a situation or a moment in time, a character and a tension that they're teasing out? Because that's, when you're talking about before about the plot lines, I can't tell you how many times I've marked and I've gone, I've seen that on Netflix, or I've seen the trailer for that or whatnot. And the thing is, like, I always say to my guys, you're not crafting something that's going to take several pages. You've got
exactly.
like a maximum, like max maybe 800 words, especially if it's a parter, like a reflection as well as what you're writing. So like that singular moment really allows you to be specific and flesh that out deeply, because just because you wrote, this really plot-driven, detailed story, but if I don't feel the tension, pacing, rhythm, flow, it doesn't leave the marker feeling anything. It's like, oh, okay, like I got all this factual kind of plot-based info, but I didn't feel the essence of the story. I didn't feel the emotion. I didn't feel the purpose. So I think breaking it down even as, okay, like, so this is how it relates maybe to my stimulus, but then what am I saying about it? What's my twist on it going to be? How can I create an interesting character, nuanced character? And so one more thing I would say is think about that too. Like, you've got your aspects of narrative, but how do you make them more unique or different? Characters that are complicated, characters that aren't wholly good or wholly bad. Like, just thinking about all those nice things that would draw you in and really make you consider that scenario and situation. And I think the thing that you just finished off saying, Adriel, and the last point that I'll make, totally agree. You do need to think about some of your big picture techniques, maybe your structural things. And extended metaphor is not that difficult, but very impactful, wouldn't you say, Adriel? So it's like a good start.
100%.
Yeah. Oh, and then you might think about structurally, are you going to have some flashbacks, or are you going to have a bit of a circular with the image, or the aspect that you start your story with is where you come back to and end with? And I mean, you don't have to have everything, organized before you start writing, but I think it's good to have a handful of these, because it will really drive your story to have that purpose from the get-go, right? As opposed to, I wrote a story and now I have to trek back and work out, well, what is the point that I'm making? Like, you start with that course. Yeah. So then, just to finish off with the student question, do you think students should memorize a piece or always do it fresh on the spot? Like, what is your suggestion here, particularly when you think about new syllabus and all the expectations students have on them?
I fall probably in the line of the former there. I think they should have some sort of base piece to go in,
Yes.
because, and this is probably the fundamental process. Like, if you're a writer and you go in and you try and write something on the spot as a teacher, so let's say, for example, if I'm a teacher and I'm about to sit the HSC, again, that's sort of what we're driving towards here. How well am I going to do if I don't prepare anything, in terms of
Yeah.
having some sort of base
Yes.
piece? Now, I'm not saying you're going to copy that verbatim, because we're going to talk a little bit about adaptation, but you've got a base there to build on. Whereas if you go in with nothing and you're just like, oh, well, I know my techniques, I know my ideas, but you haven't put it all together, it's going to be like that kid that has all the Lego pieces strewn all over the floor, compared to a kid that might have like the base already set. It's easier to build on the base that's already established, isn't it? And that's sort of the way that I would look at this. So yes, I would say that you should memorize a base piece, and then we're going to obviously look at different ways in which we can adapt the piece as well. And that's a craft that teachers can allow the students to really developed through just the practice HSC questions. And I think
Yeah.
it's something that we neglect often because remember it's timed as well. They're not spending
Mhm.
17 days writing a I don't know why I use the number
Yes.
17, but like just they're not using this random sort of time which is extended over a long period to write the piece. I've got 40 minutes. So
Yeah.
they're spending half their time thinking and fluffing around. They're probably not even going to write a piece because they're too busy considering, oh, well, I could do this, I could do that, whatever. Whereas that kid that's already got the base, they've already got a direction. You know what I'm saying? And then it's
Yeah.
just about putting the pen to the page now and looking at ways you can adapt to the stimulus on the given day. And like we said initially, if you have a idea that is universally human, one of those universal sort of humanistic ideas, well, it's going to be able to be adapted to really any form of stimulus material because let's be honest, most of that stimulus is to do with humanity. So whether it be written,
Yes.
whether it be a visual, it's going to be
Yeah.
fundamentally this idea of what it means to be human. And if you've got some idea that resonates with that, the
It's
adaptation
hard to go
process
wrong.
becomes infinitely easier. Exactly right. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think, yes, they definitely should memorize
Couldn't
some form of base
yeah.
piece for this.
No, I couldn't agree more. So I think you have offered some really wonderful pointers for students here. And then so we might just work towards the end of our episode, our Teacher Talks episode now from the teacher perspective. So this is where, teachers, might be asking, how do I teach craft of writing effectively without it feeling too vague or overwhelming, especially with the new syllabus? And so the first thing that comes to mind is I distinctly remember being an early, new scheme kind of teacher and
Mm,
having to when assessment tasks started, becoming focused on creative writing, having to think one, how do I teach it? But even how do I give feedback? Because
mm,
personally, I much more prefer the analytical style. So for me, I only ever really wrote creatively in high school when I had
mm,
to. It wasn't something that I necessarily found easy or fun or interesting. And I did some creative writing in university, which, to be fair, I did enjoy. But I wouldn't consider myself a creative writer, right?
mm,
So then,
yeah.
as a teacher, I had to put myself in those shoes. And when I see that assessment, think, okay, the way that my brain used to go was, all right, if I had to write a story in response to this,
Mm,
what are
mm,
my options? What might be some stories that I write? How
mm,
would I go about it? What would I do? And the reason I'd ask myself that is because if I have a student coming up to me and saying, what I need a suggestion or where do I move from this? Like if I don't know how to do it myself, I was like, how am I going to give them feedback? And
yeah.
that's not something I learned, overnight. Definitely not. That was something I learned by going to, our mentor teachers like
Mm, mm,
Sonia, Mark, and they would teach me what to look for. And then suddenly I knew what to look for when I was giving feedback. And they would, highlight to me what directions to go in. And they would highlight to me,
mm,
different styles and approaches. And look at this technique, look what that's doing.
mm,
And that
mm,
that was where I felt, and I remember going to you and a couple of others as
mm,
well, because everybody
mm,
had really good ideas and suggestions on how to teach craft of writing, even though back then it wasn't called craft of writing. That's,
yeah.
we were always doing creative writing in prelim, HSC in the
Yeah.
junior years. And I just remember feeling, yeah, I didn't feel that same way when it come to essay writing, right? Like I feel like I'd get an
Yeah.
essay question, I'd be okay. But I distinctly remember feeling like, oh, okay, this is a whole other ball game from me. And what do I need to do to make sure that I'm doing the best that I can to guide? And so for
Yeah.
me, I had to really understand, well, what does creative writing look like? What does it sound like? What
Mm,
should it have? And then also fit that in within the parameters of whatever that unit of work was, right? So,
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
just as a bit of a tidbit, like, I think sometimes we are too afraid to admit it is overwhelming because it
Yeah.
is. I'm not afraid to
Yeah.
admit I feel much better with it now. But
Mm,
that
mm.
beginning, I was like, well, I don't know how I'm meant to do this.
Yeah. No, no, exactly right. And then, I mean, this is the whole thing. At the end of the day, it's this whole process, isn't it? I would be
Yeah.
along the same sort of lines with you. Obviously, now I feel a little bit more comfortable because I've
Mhm.
been able to have I've been afforded that opportunity to work with some fantastic teachers, as you've sort of already alluded to, but also I'm having the opportunity to mark my HSC now for the last 4, going on 5 years now, I think, in this section, which has definitely allowed me
Honed
to
that for you. Yeah.
expand my horizons. Because it's funny, the one of the main reasons that I decided to pursue Mod C, HSC marking, or delve into that, was because I would say creative writing was my weakest area uh, in terms of my teaching. And there's a few sort of things to this. Now, I know we are all super busy and everyone's life's like, the school year is just crazy. We were talking before recording today about just the way, I mean, just a little bit of context. I used to drive an hour every day to and from work, and I'm sure that is a common sort of occurrence for many teachers. And now with the current situation that I'm in, I failed to forget, that distance. I said the other day, finished work at about 5:30, maybe 6, and that felt like a long day for me. Whereas before it used to be like a normal sort of,
To get
just it
home
was
at
just
that
the
time,
norm.
yeah.
Exactly right.
Mm,
But I
mm.
know the reason I sort of bring this up is because some of the suggestions that I'm going to sort of make. Remember, as an English teacher, um, we have this enjoyment for literature. So I'm going to say start off with making sure you read. Spend some time reading. Make
Yeah.
get rid of your. I think I've mentioned this in previous episodes. I've got rid of a lot of the social media and all that sort of stuff in my life, and even trying to limit time watching things. So it's funny. Kids will often ask me, like, "Have you seen this new movie or that movie and whatnot?" And I don't even get time to sit down really and watch movies because either I'm outside in the garden or doing something, taking the dog for a walk, or reading. And then I think that's probably a process. Like if you get 20 minutes of a day, just read. So you're just understanding what good
That's
writing looks like. You know what I'm
yeah.
saying? Like you might not
Yes,
have
that's it.
the you might not have this opportunity to maybe write as much as you would like. And let's be honest, we're not there all creating short stories or text or whatever. But
Mhm.
reading is probably a good process to start with, just to get your mind thinking about what good writing. And I like to use like my everyday sort of what I did maybe the day or two beforehand, and I'll try and embed that into my class. How can I use, my daily experiences, my daily narratives, or things that I read, or how can I use that to
Mm,
help better my teaching practices? And that's actually been helping me quite a bit in recent sort of years, is just having that time. Now, again, I did sort of give context. I understand that teachers are very busy, but I'm sure you could sacrifice 20 minutes of trying to do mind numbing, um, doom scrolling or something like that. And maybe, if you go for a walk or, go to a park nearby or whatever it may be, and take a book with you and read for 15 minutes. That's all it takes,
yeah.
15, 20 minutes. Just read. And it's very romantic as well. When I say romantic, it's that sort of romantic sort of idea of immersing yourself in nature and understanding the beauty of creativity, I think
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
definitely a fantastic sort of process. But yeah, look, I think the approaches will definitely change according to your cohort as well. That's going to be a big thing, and some of the fundamental sort of processes that allow my teaching of this unit to be less vague. Kids go off and write whatever you want is more so based on our practices. So, what are the sorts of stimuli that we are presenting our students with? What are the ideas that we have given them? So again, like I've just said to you guys, we want our kids writing about these fundamental human values, maybe fundamental human big picture concepts. Well, why not provide them with a list of 5 or 10 different ideas which they can then select, or maybe they can brainstorm and sub branch into different sort of ideas. Like that would be a good starting point for me. And again, make them universal, things that link to our humanity. And I think that will definitely help with this feeling that we can often have, is like, am I just teaching this vague writing? Again, modeled writing. So crafted writing really espouses this when we study these texts. So for example, you might look at a great piece of writing. So we've looked at Nam Lee's text, love and honor and such and such and such, and it keeps going on. And we've done an episode on that last year as well. If you want to have a listen, feel free
Yeah.
to go back and listen as well. But that's a long text. Kids aren't expected to write for the entirety of that text, but that text itself is broken down into little sub ideas. You know what I'm saying? Like, sorry, not sub ideas, subsections. It's broken up,
Yeah.
and you can focus in on one or two of those things, and really key on maybe, well, today I'm going to focus on the way that he embeds a motif within his piece. You know, how does he use that relationship between himself as a son and his father? And how does he then write that into this sort of intertextual narrative that we get into this towards the end? So you can sort of start to link some of these key ideas. And I think just breaking it down into little bite-sized activities definitely helps. Now, I'm sure we'll suggest a few ideas in our shorts and carousels as we do go along the way. And if you guys have any ideas as well that you have, please feel free to share them. We're always learning. I in no way, shape, or form have the whole database of knowledge when it comes to this. I'm always asking questions still to this day. So yeah, I guess that then is the big thing is, have that discourse with your community as well. And if you're having that discourse, you're going to encourage and model that for your students as well.
Yeah.
Again, reading, I mentioned that. If you're reading, you're going to model that for your kids as well. I think that's fantastic. And yeah, there's plenty more that we can sort of speak about, but we're sort of teetering off into the ends of our
Running out
sort
of
of
time.
episode. That's
Yeah.
right. But look, past H2C prompts, definitely there's plenty available there. There used to be a website called Pobble365. I don't know if they're
Mhm.
paid. They used to be free, but there are many. Like,
Mhm.
just go into Google Images. Like I said, what are some things that have stimulated your ideas? Look up some images and
Yeah.
go away. Maybe quotes that have
Look,
come
even
across your way.
NAPLAN prompts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. That's right. Like just
Just
different sort of
just things to
ideas.
get thinking. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think so.
exactly.
Think I think the big thing to take away from what advice you've given teachers before you wrap up is this idea of the intention in
Mm,
what you want to show them, what ideas you want to highlight, what techniques you want to highlight, and then that will move them away from it being like vague and very generalized
yeah.
as opposed to okay, because you could be quite strategic here in your programming too. And like when we pick NAMLs, most of us who teach out in Mod C pick it
Mm,
because some of its messaging aligns with other texts that we're doing with our students, or
yeah.
they're just really universal, or we love the way they've used certain techniques. We want to highlight that. So I think the more intent you have, definitely, I know I harp on a bit about programs, but like I truly believe that the more fine-tuned they are and you're backward mapping from what you want them to
Yep.
produce, that's how you stop being vague because you know where
Yeah.
you're going, you know what your end goal is, you know where you're going, and you've got those texts that are there going to help you model that with your students. And that will spark ideas. How many times, Adriel, have you taught Namli short story? I can think of multiple students who've created their HSC piece off the
Mm,
back or springboard
mm.
off of Namli's piece. And I think that's
Yeah,
wonderful.
100%.
That's what we're there
100%.
for.
You
Yeah.
much rather them springboard off of that text than a movie that they've recently
What
watched
they
on
watch on
Netflix.
Netflix.
So, yes,
Absolutely.
exactly right. So, I think
Uh,
that's the purpose,
That's
isn't
it. That's
it?
gonna be our caption. Springboard
Yeah.
off of your Mod C, not what they watched off Netflix. I love it. That's
Exactly.
awesome.
Exactly.
All right.
No,
Well, we
that's
might
good.
take that opportunity then to wrap up, Adriel, and
Yeah.
thank our listeners as always. We hope you enjoyed this Teacher Talks and tune in every week for much more teacher and English-based content from Adriel and myself, Belle. And we hope you have a lovely week and that the rest of the term goes well. Good luck. All
Yes.
the best. Take
Good
care.
luck. Bye.